Hello, welcome to the A-List. I'm your host, Dan Svoboda. With me today, I have ABC7 meteorologist Tracy Butler. Tracy, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
So, where did you go to college?
I went to Indiana University of Pennsylvania.
Wow. there's a mind trick.
Well, a lot of people here think, oh, Indiana University, and then, yes, of Pennsylvania, I have to add that. Originally, I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania,
Oh, really?
and so IUP, as it's known, is about an hour out of Pittsburgh. And for those of you who have heard of the legendary actor Jimmy Stewart, he is from Indiana, Pennsylvania.
Wow.
That's our claim to fame.
Now, did you study journalism in college?
I actually studied journalism as well as mass communications, as it was called at the time. So those were my majors. And I knew since 7th grade that I wanted to get into broadcasting somehow, some way.
What made you know at 7th grade, because I know that's a fairly early age to know
Right.
exactly what you want to do?
For those of you who have studied radio and television history, the call letters KDKA radio may mean something to you. KDKA radio is a radio station in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and it was the world's first commercial broadcast station. The world's first commercial broadcast station. I used to, when I was getting ready for school, every morning there was a man named Jack Bogut who did a morning drive show on KDKA radio. I used to listen to him every single morning. So I wrote him a fan letter one day. And I just said, you know, I love you, and at that time I was in 8th grade when I wrote him the letter, and I just want you to know that, you know, someday I want to get into radio or television just because I listen to you every morning. I was in school, I was in 8th grade, and I got called to the principal's office, which I was a nervous wreck about, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I never do anything wrong. I was so afraid. And here, Mr. Bogut's secretary had called me at school and said, Mr. Bogut would like to know when you get home from school, and he would like to talk to you about your career and what you would like to do.
Wow.
Well, for me, to put it into perspective for you, that would be like a Charlie Gibson calling you at home.
Wow.
You know, for me, at that time in my life, that's what that was like. And so I remember running home from school that day, and he called me at home.
Wow.
And spent, you know, a good 5 minutes on the phone with me, which was a huge amount of time for somebody of his stature in that city. And I will never forget that. I will never forget that. And so ever since I had that conversation with that man, I knew I always wanted to be in this industry.
That is...
It was a great thing for me.
That's amazing, yeah. Did you ever talk to him again after that, or?
Nope, never
No?
did. I do remember when I did, we conversed via letter. I ended up working at KDKA Radio eventually in advertising and public relations, and I wrote him a letter saying, hey, I made it. And
Wow.
at that time, though, he had gone on to another station, and but he's still a legendary name in the history of radio, especially in Pittsburgh.
That's pretty cool. How did you end up getting to KDK Radio? Like, how did you intern anywhere?
I did. As a matter of fact, the college that I went to, Indiana University of Pennsylvania, has a tremendous internship program. When you do an internship there, and which I highly recommend to all college students, it was 40 hours a week minimum. It was a full-time job. Now, granted, I got 12 credits for it, but hey, a 12 credit A is a pretty good thing, you know, to go toward your QPA. So I did the internship. It was 40 hours a week minimum. Many times I was working 60 to 70 hour weeks. And the experience was absolutely invaluable.
What did they have you doing? And where did you internship actually?
I did intern at KDKA Radio.
Really?
Yep, I interned. I knew, here again, I knew I wanted to be there and I wanted to be a part of that history. And so I interned at KDKA Radio in advertising. I did everything from, we would have live remotes. You know, sometimes radio stations do kind of crazy remotes. We would do something with the morning drive team there called the Spaghetti Breakfast, where we would serve spaghetti to thousands of people in the city of Pittsburgh at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
So I was there serving spaghetti at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Now, was it easy getting your internship at the radio station, or?
Actually, it was an application process. You know, some students that I went to college with applied to, smaller markets, radio and television. Some applied to magazines, newspapers. I mean, there were all types of avenues for you to intern with. I specifically targeted KDKA, and thank goodness I was accepted.
Now that's like one of the major stations in Pittsburgh, am I correct?
Yes,
it would be
absolutely.
Like analogous to a Q101 or...
Absolutely, yeah.
Wow,
it was, at the
that's pretty
time, it
impressive.
was the #1 radio station in Pittsburgh. And things have fluctuated since, but it still is a mainstay. And as I said, to have worked at the world's first commercial broadcast station, and one of the things that I got to do while I was working there, if you study radio history, there are some names that you will come across, like Harold Arlen and some of the guys that were on the radio with the Cox-Harding elections in the 1920s. And I actually got to speak to some of these people that signed on this station.
That's pretty cool.
Which was amazing.
Yeah,
these guys are talking on the radio in 1920, and I got to talk to some of them.
That's pretty amazing.
It was.
Well, we'll be right back with more from Tracy Butler. Welcome back to the A-List. I'm Dan Svoboda. With me again is Tracy Butler, ABC 7 meteorologist. So you said you internship and you worked at KDKA Radio. How did you get into TV? Like, how was the job search for that?
Well, interesting is right after KDKA Radio, there was an opening in KDKA Television and in the public relations department. And so I applied for that job and I got that job. And while I was working with KDKA TV in their public relations department, one of my jobs was to go with the talent, as they call the on-air people in this industry, to various speaking engagements. And I always loved going with the meteorologists. They would go to schools and do science experiments and go to talk to some of the senior citizens groups who were just fascinated on how the weather affected their health. So I found myself going more and more along with the meteorologists more than any of the others. Well, there was a meteorologist there at the time. His name was Brian Sussman, and he kind of took me under his wing, and I would go in the office with him on weekends, and he would basically teach me how to read computer models, do forecasting, because meteorology was not my formal training when I went to IUP. So he taught me some of the basics of forecasting. Pretty soon, I was forecasting for him,
Wow.
and he would take the forecasts on the air. So I would, learn how to analyze the maps and do all of that. Lo and behold, we were reading the Pittsburgh Press, which at the time was a newspaper in Pittsburgh, and there was a job opening for a weekend weathercaster in Wheeling, West Virginia, WTRF, Channel 7. He said, "You got to apply for this." I'm like, "Are you crazy?" I didn't study meteorology in school. He's like, "What are you doing here then? You're sitting here, you're forecasting, you understand what's going on. We've talked about the atmosphere and, granted, there's always so much more to learn when it comes to weather." So at the time, in addition to my public relations job, I had been doing commercials and industrial films for various companies. So I had some camera experience, if you will. I applied for the job in Wheeling, West Virginia, and I got it.
Wow, even without the meteorology?
Right. And so it turned out I was the only person who applied for the job that had any camera experience at all.
I would think that would be
so that helped.
fairly important.
Yeah, it's a tad bit important. So I worked in Wheeling, West Virginia for 4 months.
So then what other jobs and positions did you have, and how did you end up working your way to ABC 7?
Wow. Oh my goodness. This is so weird for me to be on this side. I'm supposed to be in your chair. I worked at Channel 7 in Wheeling, West Virginia for 4 months, and then I went to Youngstown, Ohio, WFMJ, TV 21, and I was in Youngstown, Ohio for 3.5 years. And the benefit for me to be in those markets was I got to do so much. When I was in Wheeling, I learned how to edit. In fact, they were teaching me to do sports. I was just and I love sports. I'm a huge sports fan. And that was really cool. And then I got the call to go to Youngstown. So my sports career was very brief. But I went to Youngstown. I was their main weather person there for 3.5 years. And then I got a call to go to Richmond, Virginia, WRIC TV8 in Richmond, Virginia, where I spent
back and forth.
Yeah, and Richmond is, it's a beautiful city. The state of Virginia is absolutely gorgeous. And it's sandwiched between the ocean and the mountains. So you had to really learn and understand the quirks of that city because a lot of stuff would get stuck and patterns wouldn't shift. So learning the weather patterns in Richmond was really fun. It was while I was in Richmond that I got the opportunity to meet Spencer Christian, who many of you may remember was the weather guy on Good Morning America for many, many years.
Yep.
And
I know the Tony Perkins.
he was before Tony. He was before Tony. And Spencer came to Richmond, and we'd done a live shot together. And when we were done, he said, "You know what? You should," no, I said to him, I said, "How come you never have a woman fill in for you when you go on vacation?" He's like, "Well, you know what? You really should. You did a nice job." I'm like, you say that to all the girls. Well, lo and behold, he said to me, "You know what? I want you to get me a tape." I was like, "You're kidding me." He goes, "No, here's my home address." I mean, this is a network guy. "Here's my home address because I want to make sure it gets to the right person." So I was like, "Oh, this is unbelievable." He left. He called me from the airport. He goes, "Now, you have my home address. You're going to send me a tape, right?" I'm like, I cannot believe this guy. I mean, this is incredible. Why is he wasting his time on me, you know? So I got him a tape. Didn't hear anything for months. I was at the gym, and I think it was that day my husband came running over, and he's like, "You got to call your general manager. He's looking for you." I'm like, oh gosh. This is kind of being called back to the principal's office again, you know? And so I go back, and my general manager, Joe Lewin at the time, said, "How would you like an all-expenses paid trip to New York to work on GMA for a week?" I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And here Jack Riley, who was the executive producer at the time, had called my general manager, and they wanted me to come fill in on the network. And I was on Good Morning America one day, and it's what I call a pinch me moment. The first morning I was there,
people banging on the windows and everything.
Well, it was wild because my husband and we went out and were exploring New York City, and we came back, and I had business cards under my door from agents.
Wow.
In New York City. And I don't say these things just to make myself sound so wonderful, because I'm not, but it's just the things that can happen to you if you make the most of a situation. And I'm so blessed, because if it weren't for Spencer taking me under his wing, if it weren't for Jack Bogut calling me in 8th grade, I wouldn't be here. And so it was shortly after that Jerry Taft, whom I think you all know that name.
Him, yeah.
Jerry Taft, and at the time the general manager Joe Ahern and our news director Phyllis Schwartz at Channel 7 saw me on Good Morning America. There was an opening here, and they found me, and the rest is history, and I've been in Chicago since '94.
That's an amazing story.
So
that's pretty incredible.
That's my life.
Well, we'll be right back with more from Tracy Butler. Welcome back to the A-List. We're going to have more from Tracy Butler right now. So what are your job responsibilities? Like, what is a typical day like for you at ABC 7?
Well, I get up at 2 a.m. and I get to work usually 3:20-ish. The first thing that I do is look at computer models. What the computer models do is analyze different layers of the atmosphere. You get it all on paper, and that's research that I can look at to help me make a forecast. While I am researching that, I also look at forecast discussions. These are discussions that are put out by National Weather Service offices, both in Romeoville, where our local office is located, as well as the states that surround us. Really, each Weather Service office around the country puts out a forecast discussion. And I like to read those ones from Illinois, as well as Wisconsin, Michigan, Iowa, Indiana, to kind of get a lay of the land. While I'm doing that, I am actually studying and sitting in the makeup chair because this just does not happen naturally, I will tell you that. And we have an incredible makeup artist, Julie, in the morning. And really, it might sound funny, it might sound trivial, but especially with the technology that's coming forth, with HD TV, and I said HGTV, you can tell what I watch sometimes, HD TV, it's the makeup is really, really an important aspect of what we do. And you would be amazed at how many people really pay attention to those sorts of things. I could have the most incredible forecast and nail a storm, yet somebody will call me about my hair. So,
you ever gotten a call about your hair? I have to ask.
Have I ever gotten a call about my hair?
Yeah.
All the time.
Oh my God.
All the time. Or, now this is going to be another thing that might surprise you. I started, when I first got into this business, and I know we're getting off track, but I started keeping a calendar of what I wear, because I would get calls from people saying, my wife saw you in this sweater back on March the 23rd, and she hasn't stopped talking about it, and I have to go get it for her. Where did you get it? And I'm thinking, what sweater on March 23rd? I can't remember what I wore yesterday. So I started keeping track, a calendar of what I wear, because I get calls about those things all.
That's crazy. I would never imagine that would become an issue.
I know. That's fine.
Thunder and lightning.
I know, exactly.
Sweaters?
Yeah. People's lives, and then they want to know about your hair, which is fine. People are paying attention. So anyway, my job, though, my primary job at ABC7 is to present a forecast to people. We go on the air at 4:57 a.m.
Ouch.
And I'm on the air on the 7s. Weather and traffic on the 7s is our format for our morning show, and we go to 7 a.m. And then I do cut-ins during Good Morning America, and then I get a little bit, not really much of a break, but a little bit of a break at 9 o'clock, but I have to prepare for the 11 a.m. show.
That is a long day.
And it can be, but you know what? When you're doing something that you really care about and that you really love doing, the time goes like that. And I'm really lucky to be doing something that I love so much. I will be the first person to admit that I don't get every forecast right. And there's not a forecaster that does in this world. But you know what? That's the challenge of weather, and that's
like
the
a
fun
puzzle.
thing. I always use that analogy. It's like building a puzzle, and you have to grab all the layers of the atmosphere that are your pieces and try and fit them together. And that's the great thing about weather.
So do you come up with your forecasts like every day?
Yes.
So you don't do it every 7 days? It's like the 7-day forecast, you do it?
No, we do a 7-day forecast, but I have to analyze every one of those days, and it can be different. It can change, day to day to day. I mean, these storm systems don't always run on the time frame that you want them to or that you forecast. They easily can speed up. The jet stream can, push them along, or they can get caught up and stuck over you for days and days and days. And sometimes it's difficult to figure out when that thing's finally going to budge. But that's the fun thing about it, too, is doing that analysis. And I take it very, very seriously. And when I first got into this business, if a forecast was off by more than 3 degrees, I would literally cry about it.
Wow.
And I had to learn how to get over that, which eventually I did. But I still, if a forecast isn't exactly the way I thought it would be, I get very upset about it, because I know a lot of people rely on that.
What kind of technology is there that helps you, that aids you in predicting the forecast, or is it just your brain?
Well, the brain, of course. A lot of school students will ask me, well, I want to get into meteorology, or if I want to get into television, what kind of courses should I take? Grab everything you can, is what I tell them. I do math, of course, science every day. My presentation involves speaking well and good English, spelling. If I misspell thunderstorm, that's not going to look too good. Credibility goes down. But the technology, the Doppler radar systems, you know, the satellite imagery that we look at, infrared satellite and visible satellite pictures, the computer models that we use, I'll throw out some letters, they may not mean anything to you, but the GFS and the NAM and the MOS data, and there's so many different computer models is my point. And I love to look at as many as I possibly can.
So that's a lot of letters.
There's a lot of letters, yeah. And plus, not only that, but the other thing, if you're doing weather, that you have to remember, just the graphics technology to put together your presentation.
Well, that's all very interesting, but we're going to have to take a break real fast, and we'll be right back. Hello, welcome back to the A-List. I'm Dan Svoboda, and with me today is Tracy Butler. So, what is the difference between broadcast media and internet media?
Well, the thing is, you know, I mean, broadcast media, you turn on Channel 7, you see me on your TV. And, you know, with one of the things that I have been doing recently with some of the bigger storm systems that we have, something called webcasting. You know, people can jump right on their computer, they can follow what I'm doing. I mean, I'm literally just sitting in there in the studio and talking people through how I'm coming up with the forecast. I don't have that luxury, and nor do people have the time if they're just turning on their television set to sit there and listen to me and, you know, how I'm coming up with the forecast. Whereas if you have a captive audience who they are specifically looking at the webcast to, you know, get an idea, well, how's she coming up with this?
Yeah.
You know, if they have that luxury to sit there at their computer screen and watch, you can get a little more in detail about things with them.
Now, how does that work? How do you do that?
Well, technically, I couldn't tell you, but no. But what happens is, you know, our website people have just set up the instruments necessary where I can sit in the ABC 7 Weather Center, put on a microphone like you guys did with me here, and just talk. And talk about the weather, and people can go to abc7chicago.com. We'll advertise that we're going to do a live webcast, you know, and you can see that on our website. Just click right on there, and you can listen and you can watch right on your computer as we're doing them, as we're doing our work.
How long do they last? Like anywhere from?
Anywhere from, you know, as much time as I have to really talk people through a storm. Some of the recent storms we've had, I'll do anything from 5 to 20 minutes.
Now, this is how you're coming up with your forecast, or what they should do to prepare for the storm?
Any and all. And that's the luxury you have when you're doing a webcast like that. They give you as much time as you want.
No time constraints, right?
No time constraints. Where when you're on live television, you know, when I'm on the 7s for the morning show, sometimes I'll get 10 seconds to to communicate the weather to people. In my longer segments, it's like, hey, it's cold. Sometimes I'll get a minute and a half for some of the longer segments, 2 minutes. So on live television, your time constraints are more.
So you said earlier how lucky you were by meeting all these people that helped you get to where you are today. What tips do you have for people who want to go into broadcasting as their career?
First of all, the internship. You know, and I have seen a lot of interns, and there are some who will just, you know, if you want them to go get coffee, they will, and that's great. And you know what? If that's all you want to do, though, you know, you need, I mean, that's great, and it's great to help people out during your internship, but you got to do something that's going to set yourself apart from all the rest. That internship, you should treat it like a job, because you know what? There are so many people in that newsroom or in that newspaper building who are seeing you and what you're doing, and every single day you got to think of it as a networking opportunity. You really, really do. That's your time to take advantage of that situation. There are so many people that are competing for these jobs.
I would imagine that it would be fairly competitive.
It is extremely competitive, and you got to do something that sets yourself apart from all the rest. As I told you before, I worked a 40-hour internship minimum. I was competing with other students who only did 3 hours a week of an internship. I would get jobs assigned to me by my bosses during these internships because they knew I would be there every single day to follow through. Whereas somebody who's doing 3 hours a
you
week
don't
for an
know,
internship.
Not very dependable.
No, I mean, they might be dependable people, but they're not there to complete the assignment. So you have to take advantage of an internship if you can. That's your experience. You have to make the most of every single type of class, whether it's geography or history or English or math or spelling, you know, a foreign language. Everything. You have to maximize your educational opportunities.
Now you said set yourself apart. What kind of things, if you're like, if people watching there have an internship, what kind of things could they do to set themselves apart from everybody else?
Something that I did in my career is some of the charitable organizations that I became involved with. Some of the things that I started when I was in Youngstown, Ohio, I started a program called the Weather Sketchers Club. At the time, I saw that many schools were eliminating their arts programs and their physical education programs and their music programs. So I wanted to come up with a way to continue fostering children's creativity through art. And I have been doing this since, 1988, where I will show children's artwork on television just to encourage them to pick up their markers and their crayons and, you know, put the weather on paper and send it to me.
That would mean the world to a little kid who's watching TV. There's my picture. That,
right.
Yeah, that.
But it means the world to me because I see the talent of these youngsters, and it's really heartwarming. Just a couple of weeks ago, I had a girl say, "I was one of your weather sketchers," and now she's like 21 years old. Makes me feel old, you know. But it's a program that's very near and dear to my heart.
Now, are there any local colleges or even colleges out of state that are really good for their TV, media, radio?
Oh, you know what? There are so many. There are too many. We don't have enough time in this segment, but there are too many really to mention. There are a lot.
How about locally? Is there?
Locally, I know that the College of DuPage has a meteorology department, if that's your forte, and if you want to stay close to home. I know one of the meteorology professors out there who does a lot of storm chasing. They are really high on my list. NIU, they have some great facilities out there as well. There are so many. Valparaiso, you can go to Wisconsin. I mean, we are so lucky in this area that we have so many opportunities quite close.
Well, I'd like to thank you a lot for coming to do this interview. It was a pleasure meeting you. I'm glad you came. And I'd like to thank you for watching. I'm your host, Dan Svoboda. I'll see you next time.